The stars were quiet above, but the fire in the sky screamed louder than anything Alina had ever heard. The spaceship broke apart as it entered the planet's atmosphere, burning and shaking like it was made of paper. Dr. Alina Cross held tightly to her seat, her knuckles white, her breath frozen in fear. Everything around her was chaos, flashing lights, warning alarms, and the voice of the ship's AI saying, "Critical failure," again and again. Then silence. The crash had come and gone, leaving smoke and broken metal on a planet no one had ever named. Alina opened her eyes, coughing from the smoke, her ears ringing. She unstrapped herself and looked around, searching for survivors. Bodies lay still across the wreckage, some burned, some crushed. She felt tears rise but held them back. This was not the time to cry. She was a biologist, trained for extreme survival. But not like this. This was not Earth. Not even a known planet. It was just a stop during their research mission. And now it had become her prison. As she climbed out of the broken ship, the sky above was purple, the sun weak and red. The ground was dry, cracked, and strange blue plants grew in sharp, spiky shapes. The air was thin, but breathable. Her suit's monitor blinked. Barely any supplies left. No signal, no backup. Then she heard movement behind her. She turned quickly and saw someone or something moving through the smoke. Her heart jumped. A tall figure stepped out, covered in black armor with glowing green veins across the skin. It was not human. It was Zorkin, one of the alien researchers. From the other side of the Alliance, his kind didn't speak much, and humans didn't trust them. She didn't either, but right now he was all she had. He looked at her with narrow yellow eyes, his breathing heavy, his left arm bleeding dark blue blood. He spoke slowly in rough English. "Only we survive." Alina didn't know if that was good news or bad. She looked around again. He was right. Everyone else was gone, for a moment. They just stared at each other. Then the wind picked up, bringing a deep growl from the trees. Alina turned to look at the forest nearby, but she couldn't see what made the sound. "It wasn't safe here. We must move," Zorkin said, pointing toward the mountains in the distance. "There," he added. "Shelter." She didn't want to follow him, but staying at the crash site was dangerous. She nodded slowly, grabbing a small bag of tools and food. Together, they walked through the strange world, each step filled with silence and suspicion. The land was dry and cracked, with rivers of glowing green liquid that hissed when the wind blew. Strange birds flew above with glass-like wings, and plants seemed to move when no one was watching. Alina tried to understand the planet, but it made no sense. The rules of nature didn't apply here. After hours of walking, they reached a cave, hidden between two giant stones. Inside, the air was cooler, the light dim. They built a small fire from dry plant stalks, and Alina opened her ration pack. Zorkin sat across from her, silent, still bleeding, but watching her closely. "You're hurt," she said finally. He nodded. "We'll heal." She didn't trust him, but she also didn't want him to die. They needed each other, at least for now. As night fell, the world outside the cave began to hum. Soft sounds, almost like voices, drifted in the air. Alina sat up, listening carefully. Zorkin had fallen asleep, his eyes closed, but his mouth moved slightly, whispering in his own language. She leaned closer, curious, but then he said something in English, clear and slow. "They watch." Alina froze. She looked outside the cave. No movement, just darkness and strange glowing trees. Who was watching? She waited, holding her breath, but Zorkin didn't speak again. He was asleep or pretending. Alina lay down but could not rest. Her mind raced with questions, fear, and the echo of his words. They watch. She was alone on an alien planet, with a creature she didn't understand. But one thing was certain. This was no ordinary world. Something lived here, something ancient and hidden, and now it knew she was here too. The sky was never fully dark. Even at night, it glowed softly, like something under the surface of the stars was watching, breathing. Alina stood at the mouth, of the cave, staring at the purple sky. Feeling like a tiny part of something big and dangerous, the wind moved strangely, as if it carried voices soft. Whispering, not quite words, but not just noise either. She hadn't slept. Zorkin hadn't moved since the night. He sat still, meditating or resting, or something else she didn't understand. He was a mystery, a puzzle wrapped in armor and scars. Alina walked out of the cave, slowly and carefully. She needed water, food, and answers. But more than anything, she needed to understand this planet. It was quiet, too quiet, and that was never good. A few meters from the cave, she found something odd. A set of footprints, not hers, and not Zorkin's. They were small, round, and deep in the soil, fresh. She looked around quickly, heart pounding, no sign of anyone. She called out, but no answer came, only a soft hiss from the trees. She backed away, returning to the cave, mind racing. When she stepped back in, Zorkin opened his eyes slowly. "They are awake," he said calmly. Alina blinked. "Who? What are you talking about?" "The ones who came before us," he answered. "They live in the planet now." She wanted to ask more, but he stood up and walked toward the back of the cave. There was a small tunnel behind the rocks, hidden by shadows. He pointed to it. "You must see." Alina followed him through the narrow space, ducking under low stone, stepping over glowing roots. At the end of the tunnel was a hidden chamber, stone walls covered in symbols and lines, carvings of creatures, stars, strange machines, and one symbol repeated again and again. A circle with two halves, one bright, one dark. Zorkin touched the symbol and said, "Life and death, man and seed." Alina felt cold all over. She didn't know what it meant, but the way he said it made her skin crawl. "These marks are not yours?" she asked. "No," Zorkin replied. "They are older than both our species." There were broken machines in the chamber, long metal arms, shattered glass pods, tubes filled with dry dust. She knelt beside one and wiped off the dirt, revealing a screen. Surprisingly, it blinked once, then died. Something powered this, she whispered. "Not too long ago." Zorkin looked around, his face more serious than before. "This place was not made for war," he said. "It was made for something else." Before they could explore more, a loud cracking sound echoed from above. The ground shook slightly, dust falling from the cave ceiling. They both rushed out and looked toward the sky. A tree nearby was burning, and above it, something flew past, fast, quiet, and nearly invisible. "It's not just us," Alina said. "There's something watching." That night, they took turns keeping watch. Alina sat near the fire, holding a piece of the broken machine she had taken from the chamber. It was smooth, warm to the touch, even though it shouldn't be. It pulsed gently, like a heartbeat. She felt dizzy again, like before. Her skin tingled, and her chest felt heavy. She tried to breathe slowly, but her body was reacting. Something in the air, the water, or maybe the planet itself. Zorkin noticed. "Your body is changing," he said. "The planet does this." "How do you know?" she asked, voice shaking. "Because it changed my people too," he replied. "Long ago." He told her a story, not in full words, but in fragments. His ancestors once visited this world and left changed. Some never returned. Some became more than what they were, stronger, faster, stranger. Some created life that never should have been. Alina touched her wrist where she had felt the pulse earlier. It was glowing faintly now. Her blood was reacting to something in this place. Maybe to Zorkin, maybe to the planet, or maybe to what was. Waiting in the dark, before she could speak, a loud scream echoed from the forest. Not human, not alien, just raw and wild. They both stood still, listening. Then silence returned, deeper and heavier than before. Alina turned to Zorkin, her voice low. "What was that?" He answered with a single word, "Warning." The scream had faded, but its echo stayed inside Alina's chest. It was not just a sound, it was a warning that something ancient had woken up. She sat by the fire, staring at her hands. They looked the same, but she could feel it. Something was different. Her heart beat faster than usual. Her senses were sharper. She could hear distant crackles of leaves far outside the cave. She could even feel Zorkin's presence behind her without turning. He was quiet, as always, but not still. He moved like a shadow. Slowly, watching, thinking. She didn't trust him, not fully. But he had saved her twice now, and she could not survive this world alone. Finally she spoke. "What is this planet doing to me?" Zorkin didn't answer at first. Then he sat beside her and said, "It is not just the planet." She turned to him, confused. "You drank from the water, yes?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "Only a little." Zorkin's face grew darker, more serious. "The water holds old code," he said, "biocode left behind by the ancients. It mixes with what is living," he added. "It changes the future." Alina tried to understand. "So, I'm mutating?" He shook his head. "Not mutating," he said. "Becoming." She didn't like the sound of that. She stood up, pacing the cave, her thoughts spinning. She wasn't sick, but she wasn't normal anymore either. She felt stronger, more aware, and warmer, like something was growing inside her. Zorkin finally stood and faced her. "We must make a deal," he said. Alina raised an eyebrow. "A deal?" He nodded. "We cannot survive without each other, but we must trust." "Trust?" She repeated. "That's hard when I don't know what you are." He stepped closer, lifting his armor to show her a mark on his chest. 3 glowing lines that pulsed like hers. "I carry the same code," he said. "We are now bonded by the planet." Alina looked down at her own wrist, where the glow had returned. They were both affected, both changed. The planet had done something to them, linked them in a way she didn't yet understand. Zorkin sat again, drawing a circle in the dust, then splitting it in half. "Together, survival," he said. "Apart, death." He then drew a strange symbol, 2 figures, joined by a spiral. "This," he added, "is what the planet wants." Alina stared at the symbol, unease growing in her chest. Why would a planet want anything? She asked. Zorkin looked at her with eyes full of memory. "Because it is not dead." Suddenly, the fire flickered, turning blue for a moment. A cold wind blew into the cave, but there was no opening behind them. Alina grabbed her knife and turned, but saw nothing. Still, she felt that something had passed through, like a breath on her skin. They were not alone, not even here. In the deepest shadows of the mountain, Zorkin placed a small piece of crystal into the fire, and it flared back to normal. "The Watchers are near," he whispered. Alina sat back down, her voice softer. "What kind of deal are you offering?" Zorkin answered without delay. "Share knowledge, share defense, share time." "And in return?" She asked carefully. "We complete what the planet started," he said. That line made her breath stop. "What does that mean?" she asked, voice shaking slightly. Zorkin didn't answer directly. He simply looked at her glowing wrist and said, "You already know." Alina felt the heat rise in her body again. Not like fever, but something more. She looked away, unsure of what was happening. She was changing, and it scared her. But the part that scared her most was she wasn't resisting it anymore. The next morning, they began to build. They found pieces from the crash site, solar panels, broken bots, damaged scanners. They used parts from the ancient chamber, 2 metal that bent like cloth, stones that hummed with energy. They created a small base near the cave, a place to rest and to plan. As they worked, Alina noticed something. Zorkin never asked questions about Earth or humans, but he always listened closely when she spoke, like he was learning from her, storing her words like treasure. At night, she asked him, "Why do you help me?" He looked up at the stars, and after a long pause said, "Because you are the first." "The first what?" she asked. He looked at her belly for just a second, then turned away. "You will know soon." She woke up before the sun rose, but she hadn't really slept. Dreams had chased her all night, blurry visions of light, water, and something moving. Beneath her skin, Alina sat up with a gasp, hand pressed to her chest. The air in the cave felt thick, like it was pressing against her from all sides. Outside, the sky was turning from purple to red. Clouds moved too fast, like they were being pulled by something far above. Zorkin stood near the edge of the camp, not moving, not speaking. He had been awake for hours, or maybe he never slept at all. Alina touched her stomach without thinking. It felt warm, almost pulsing. She shook her head, trying to focus. She was not sick. There was no fever, no pain. But her body, it was not hers anymore. She stepped outside. Feeling the strange soil under her boots, Zorkin turned to her as if he had heard her thoughts. "It has started," he said calmly. Alina narrowed her eyes. "What has?" Zorkin walked over and handed her a small mirror from the wreckage. "Look," he said. She raised the mirror and froze. Her eyes, once green, were now speckled with glowing gold. Tiny lights shimmered inside them, like stars trapped behind her pupils. She dropped the mirror, heart pounding. "This isn't possible," she whispered. But Zorkin didn't answer. He only looked at her with something between fear and respect. They sat in silence for a while. The wind whispered again, brushing past their camp like it had a mind of its own. Alina finally spoke. "This thing inside me, what is it?" Zorkin looked down, then up at the sky. "It is not just yours," he said. "It is the planet's too." Alina clenched her fists. "I didn't agree to this," Zorkin nodded. "The planet does not ask, it gives." Later that day, while gathering supplies near the old ruins, Alina noticed something strange. A plant she had touched the day before had moved. Not like it grew, it had moved positions entirely. She placed her hand near it again, and the leaves tilted toward her. She backed away slowly, eyes wide. Zorkin appeared behind her. "The world sees you now," he said. "It did not before." Back at camp, Alina used an old scanner from the ship to check her blood. The results made no sense. Her cells were multiplying, but not like normal. They were forming new patterns, structures she had never seen before. Something inside her was building, but not just life, purpose. She stared at the screen for a long time, the lights blinking in quiet rhythm. Then she whispered, "It's growing fast." Zorkin nodded slowly. "It will not wait." That night, Alina dreamed again. She saw herself walking through a glowing forest, trees bending toward her as she passed. In her arms was a child, not fully human, not fully alien, but something new. She held it close. And the planet whispered, "Balance." She woke up shaking, sweat dripping from her forehead. She reached for her water pack, but it was floating gently, just an inch off the ground. She blinked, and it dropped. Her breath caught in her throat. "Zorkin," she called. "I think something's wrong with me." He entered quickly, kneeling beside her. "You are shifting," he said. "The energy inside is too strong." She looked at him with wide eyes. "What does it want?" "From me?" Zorkin placed his hand over her chest, careful and slow. "To survive, it must be born," he said. Alina pulled away, standing up with anger. "This isn't natural," she shouted. "It's using me." Zorkin did not argue. "It is both curse and gift," he said. "What grows in you can end war, or start a new one." His words hung in the air like smoke. She walked away from the fire, needing space, needing air. As she stood outside, the sky suddenly flashed, just for a second, like a camera flash. Then, something fell from the sky, crashing into the forest nearby. They both rushed toward the sound. Weapons in hand, through the trees, they found a pod half buried, metal still steaming. Zorkin approached it slowly, hand ready on his blade. The pod hissed open, and a recording played. A hologram appeared, an alien woman, same species as Zorkin. She spoke in a cold, sharp voice. "The anomaly has been detected. The seed has taken root. All bonded pairs must be neutralized." Alina's blood ran cold. She turned to Zorkin. "They know." He looked at her, his voice low. "They are coming." She heard two heartbeats. One was her own, strong and steady. The other was smaller, Faster, almost musical. It was coming from inside her. Alina stood in front of the cracked mirror from the wreckage. Her hands pressed against her belly. It wasn't large yet, but something was there. Something growing, something real. She wasn't just imagining things now. Her body had made the decision before her mind could catch up. It was not just survival anymore. It was transformation. Outside, the wind howled louder than usual. The forest no longer felt like background. It felt alive, aware, watching. The pod from the sky had brought more than a message. It had brought a deadline. Zorkin stood near the edge of the trees, silent as always, but today, there was something different in his posture. He looked restless, like a hunter who knew he was being hunted. Alina walked over to him, her voice calm but sharp. "You knew this would happen." He didn't deny it. "Yes," he said, "but I hoped the planet would protect us longer." She crossed her arms, feeling the pressure inside her grow stronger with every hour. "They called it a seed," she said. "What does that mean?" Zorkin looked at her, his voice heavy with memory. "Thousands of years ago, this planet chose to carry the future," he said, "but not alone." He drew a symbol in the dirt, two figures, a spiral between them and a child above. "It joins two enemies, creates a third," he said. "A life that belongs to both and neither." Alina sat down, her legs tired, her thoughts racing. "So I'm carrying the answer to a war one never joined," she muttered. Zorkin knelt beside her. "Not the answer," he said, "the start of a question." She smiled bitterly. "That doesn't make me feel better." As the sun rose higher, the air grew warmer. Her body was changing faster. Now her senses sharper, her skin slightly glowing at night. The baby inside her, or whatever it was, seemed to pulse in rhythm with the planet. She felt it respond when she was afraid, and calm when Zorkin was near. She wasn't sure if that comforted or terrified her. Later, while scavenging near the crashed ship, they found bones, old bones, humanoid. But wrong. Too long, too light. Skull stretched like it had grown under a different sky. Zorkin bent down and whispered, "One of the first." Beside the bones was a data crystal. They took it back to the cave and activated it with power from a broken panel. A small recording played blurry, old, filled with static. A human voice, female, panicked. "They said it was a gift," the voice said. "But it grows too fast and I—" The message ended in a crackle. Alina sat frozen, eyes locked on the now dark crystal. "They didn't survive," she said. Zorkin placed a hand on her shoulder. "They didn't have you," he said quietly, "or me." That night, the forest changed. The trees pulsed with light, and the air smelled like metal and rain. Zorkin woke her with a single word. "Run." She didn't ask why. She felt it too, a pressure in the air, like a giant hand was pressing down on the world. They packed what little they had and fled into the cliffs, deeper into the wild zones. There were no maps for this area, no signals, only instinct. Hours passed, maybe more. Time felt strange out here. They found shelter in a narrow canyon with glowing moss on the walls. Alina dropped to her knees, exhausted, breath short. Her hands trembled, and her stomach was hot to the touch. She screamed not from pain, but from fear. Zorkin knelt beside her, placing both hands on her back. "The child is speaking," he said. "It wants to live." Tears rolled down Alina's face. "I didn't choose this," she whispered. Zorkin leaned closer. "But now you must protect it." She nodded slowly, her hand moving over her belly. It was no longer just a secret inside her. It was a promise, a future, a dangerous miracle. The next morning, they climbed higher into the cliffs and found a hidden cave. Inside was something unexpected, ancient tech, still working, humming with energy. The machines lit up when Alina entered. Zorkin stared in shock. "They recognize your blood." Screens activated on their own, showing maps, star charts, and then images of her, or someone like her, with glowing eyes and a child in her arms. A human and alien together, standing in peace. Zorkin looked at her, voice shaking. "This is not the first time." he said, "but it may be the last." Suddenly, a siren blared from the cave walls on one of the screens. 3 red dots blinked, approaching fast. Alina stood up, her face hard, her voice steady. "They're coming," she said, "and they don't want peace." The cave was no longer silent. Lights blinked along the stone walls, machines hummed, and something deep underground had begun to move. Alina stood in the center, her hands glowing faintly, the air around her pulsing like it had a heartbeat. She didn't know how, but the ancient tech was listening to her, responding to her. Zorkin watched from the edge, his body tense, his blade ready. The red dots on the screen had multiplied. 3 became 6, 6 became 9. Ships were coming. Not for rescue, not for peace, but for one purpose, to end what had started inside her. "They found us," he said quietly. Alina nodded, her face pale but calm. "They don't want the child," she said. "They want to erase it." Outside, the sky cracked open with thunder, not from a storm, but from engines. Strange craft, sharp like knives, sliced through the clouds. They circled like vultures, scanning, locking onto the energy source beneath them. This planet, once silent, was now a target. Zorkin placed a hand on the wall, speaking in a low voice. "This place was built to protect," he said. "It may still remember how." Alina turned to the screen, watching as a line of alien characters appeared. It translated slowly, word by word: heart, womb, beacon, weapon. She felt the child move inside her, stronger now, aware. It wasn't just life, it was power. And now the universe had come to take it, or destroy it. They moved deeper into the cave. Guided by light from the walls, steps led down into a chamber, filled with water, glowing, still, ancient. Floating above it was a structure, a cradle made of metal and light. Alina stepped closer, her breath shallow. Zorkin spoke, his voice shaking. "This is where the first child was meant to be born." Suddenly, alarms screamed again. Something had entered the cave's upper levels. Footsteps echoed above, metal scraping on stone, not human. Not Zorkin's kind either. A new kind of soldier built for cleansing, built for silence. "We don't have time," Alina said. She turned to Zorkin, her voice steady. "Protect the child, no matter what happens to me." But he shook his head, stepping forward. "No," he said. "We protect it together." They ran back up the stone path, toward the main chamber. The walls flashed with red light. "Enemy detected. System defense offline." Alina reached the console. Placing both hands on it, her skin sparked against the surface, and the lights turned blue. Power returned to the walls, to the ceiling, to the weapons that had been asleep for centuries. Turrets dropped down and fired beams of pure light into the corridors, but it wasn't enough. The soldiers broke through, tall, armored, faceless. They moved like shadows, fast and cold. Zorkin met the first wave with blade and fury. Alina stood behind him, reaching out with her glowing hands. Machines responded to her thoughts now. She called them, and they moved. Stone shaped itself into walls, into traps, into spikes that rose from the floor. But more soldiers kept coming. They fired shock rounds, non-lethal, meant to disable. One hit Alina in the chest and threw her against the wall. She cried out. Curling around her stomach, Zorkin roared, louder than the gunfire. He grabbed her and pulled her into a side tunnel. They ran, the world behind them collapsing. Smoke, fire, stone. This planet was fighting back, but it was dying too. They reached the lower chamber again, where the glowing pool waited. Alina stumbled to the edge, breath heavy, vision blurred. The child was ready, not to be born, but to be seen. She stepped into the water, and it rose to meet her, lifting her gently into the cradle. Light surrounded her body, and the machines began to hum. A soft voice echoed through the cave. Connection confirmed. Zorkin stood guard at the chamber door, blade in hand. He looked back once at Alina, his eyes full of fear and pride. She glowed like a star, suspended in liquid light. She was no longer just human, no longer just herself. Outside, the enemy gathered at the chamber entrance. One stepped forward, armor marked with symbols of command. He held up a scanner and said, "The seed must not survive." Zorkin replied with no hesitation, "Then neither will you." The ground shook. The machine screamed. Elena's body arched inside the cradle, light exploding from her chest. A wave of energy burst from the pool, pushing back the intruders like a storm. The lead soldier was knocked down, his armor cracked. He looked up and saw the impossible. The child still unborn had. It did not cry, it did not scream. The moment the child entered the world, everything went silent. Even the planet itself seemed to hold its breath. Elena floated above the glowing water, her body weak, her mind full of light. In her arms was the child, not just hers, not just Zorkin's, but something else. Its skin shimmered with a soft glow, its eyes wide and silver, with no whites, no pupils, only reflection. It looked at her as if it had lived 1,000 years. Zorkin stood beside her, his weapon lowered, his breath slow. He did not speak, he simply looked at the child. Then at Elena, and bowed his head, not as a warrior, not as a guardian, but as someone witnessing something holy. For a long moment, none of them moved. The enemy soldiers had fallen back, stunned, some injured, some unconscious. The energy that burst from the child had not killed, but it had changed. Those who had come to destroy now sat in silence, weapons on the ground, eyes wide with fear. One of them, a high-ranking officer, stepped forward slowly. He stared at the child, then at Elena, and asked, "What is it?" Elena looked down at the baby in her arms. "I don't know," she said quietly, "but I know it isn't your enemy." The officer looked uncertain. He stepped closer, and the child reached out a tiny hand. The air around them shifted, warmer, calmer. The officer fell to his knees, tears forming in his eyes. "It's peaceful," he whispered. "It's pure." Zorkin stepped forward, his voice deep and steady. "This is the child of two bloods," he said, "created not by war, but by the will of this world." He looked around at the broken machines, the wounded soldiers, the ruins of violence. "Let this be the last destruction," he said, "not the first of many." Outside, the sky had changed. The clouds no longer moved in chaos, they flowed gently. Glowing from within, the trees stood still, as if watching. The wind carried no screams, no warnings, only calm. Elena stood with the child in her arms and walked forward. She passed through the broken wall of the ancient cave. The remaining soldiers stepped aside, not by command, but by instinct. None of them could explain it, but they felt it in their bones. The war ended with this child's breath. In the days that followed, the ships left the sky, not in fear, but in understanding. This was no longer a battlefield, it was a place of something new, something sacred. Elena and Zorkin stayed. They rebuilt the shelter near the ancient chamber, not as a hiding place, but as a home. The machines of the past now worked alongside them, no longer silent, no longer forgotten. The child grew fast. Days felt like weeks, weeks like seasons. It spoke without words, touched without hands, and learned everything without being taught. It smiled often, and when it did, the planet bloomed. Flowers opened where none had grown, and old trees healed their bark. Other visitors came, human scientists, alien elders, warriors turned pilgrims. They did not come to fight. They came to see the miracle. They brought gifts, questions, hope, and in return, they left with something more: peace, not just in words, but in their hearts. Elena would sometimes sit alone at night, watching the stars. She thought of Earth, of the mission that never finished, of the life she lost. But then she would feel a small hand reach for hers, warm and glowing, and she would smile. Zorkin stayed by her side. He never spoke of returning to his people, because here he had found more than duty. He had found purpose, and something like love. The child, whom they named Kairos, meaning the right moment, grew in both form and wisdom. It spoke one day, its voice soft but clear. "I dream of skies that never had war." And from that moment on, the world listened. The final transmission sent from the planet carried no warnings, no orders, no demands, just one simple message, broadcast in every language known. A child has been born. Of two worlds, to unite 1,000. And across the galaxy, people stopped. Some cried, some prayed, and some simply looked up at the stars, and for the first time in generations, they did not see enemies, they saw possibility.